Hello and welcome. This is View from the Top. Thank you for joining us. Education is pivotal to sustainable development and for any country to realize developmental outcomes, especially eradication of poverty, there has to be access to quality education. According to the 1979 Constitution, education in Nigeria is the responsibility of the federal, state, and local governments, while the Ministry of Education oversees the sector. It is responsible for implementing policies aimed at developing the education system. The extent to which these expectations are being met and the impact on national development will be analyzed by Malam Bolaji Abdullahi, a former Kwara State Commissioner for Education, Science and Technology and two-time Minister of the Federal Republic. Bolaji Abdullahi is my guest on View from the Top today, and I want to thank him very much. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Before we start our conversation, here is a brief profile of my guest. Malam Bolaji Abdullahi was born in 1969. He attended the University of Lagos, Akoka, where he graduated with a BSc in Mass Communication. He started his working career as a volunteer and part-time worker in civil society organizations and international agencies before joining This Day newspapers as a reporter in 1997. He left journalism as deputy editor of This Day in 2000. In 2002, he got a master's degree from the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex in the United Kingdom. He was appointed Special Assistant Communication and Strategy to the then Kwara State Governor, Dr. Bukola Saraki, in 2003, and was 2 years later appointed Special Advisor on Policy and Strategy to the same governor. In 2007, he was appointed Commissioner of Education, Science and Technology, Minister of Youth Development in July 2011, and later Minister of Sports from 2012 to 2014. You have served in various capacities, but you remain passionate about education. Why does the state of education continue to keep you up at night?
The thing about education is that it is the essence of everything. Like you rightly pointed out in your introductory remarks, the essence of who we become as individual members of the society, as a country, depends on what we are able to do with our education. That has been very clear to me, and because it's been made very clear over the years, I'm evidence myself, coming from the kind of background that I've come from. Poor parents, uneducated parents, who saw the wisdom in putting their child in school. So for me, there is no other form of empowerment that is sustainable as giving a child education. And I think once that is clear to you, it's not something you do as a job, it's something you do as a calling. So no matter what you go on to do, that will always be at the back of your mind, that whatever little you can, whatever you can contribute to giving opportunities to children to get educated, you will always want to be a part of it.
The government has the responsibility to provide quality education, but most states are, the economy, not just the state, not just economy at the state level, is barely able to cope with these and other obligations. In view of this, how realistic can government-funded education be?
Yeah, government can fund education. Over the years, we've seen arguments that government is not able to meet the United Nations Education and Scientific Cultural UNESCO prescription that 25% of budget or so should go for education. We say it's not realistic, and most states are not able to meet that. As at last year, I think the average Nigeria spending on education is still at 8%. So, but my contention is that the percentage does not really matter. If you need to spend 10 billion and you are able to spend 5 billion, the question should not really be how much you have spent, but what you are spending on and what value you are getting for the money. Even if you are spending just 2% of your budget, if the 2% is properly targeted at those factors that are likely to bring greater results in the end, then it will have been justified. But it doesn't matter if you're spending 50% of your budget, but they are not targeted at those things that could bring greater results in terms of children learning achievements at all levels, then it's wasted. It's better to spend 2% that is efficient than to spend 20% that is inefficient. That's the point I'm making, in other words. So the debate, money is very important, but money is not the most important thing in education management. The principle is that you put resources where you most expect results. In primary school, for example, where do we most expect result? In the schools. Not in the governor's office, not in the Ministry of Education, not in the local government. Where you most expect result is the schools. So if you are able to move resources closer to the school, then you stand a good chance of getting results at that level. So the idea is that if we can fund this school-based budget, then you are likely to get greater results out of that school than if you are managing the resources from a center somewhere far removed from the school.
It used to be that government and missionaries were funding education.
Yes.
Government mainly in those days.
Yes.
And then after a while, the space was opened up to the private sector,
yes,
beginning from the primary level, later to the secondary level, now to the tertiary level.
Yes.
It seems to us, there's a general belief that the more the private sector got involved, the more the government abdicated its responsibilities.
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment of the situation?
Yes, you'll be right to conclude so. But you see, there are levels of education that are best delivered by the private sector. And there are levels of education that are best delivered by government. Private participation in itself is not bad. It depends on what the private sector is doing. And the fundamental ethical principle here is what level of inclusion does the participation of the private sector allows. The first 20, 30 years of Nigeria's independence, we used education to close the gap in social inequality. At that point, it didn't matter who your parents were. As long as you are able to go into schools, the chances are high that you will achieve something. But in 2015, the possibility of you getting any quality of education depends largely on who your parents are.
Those whose parents can afford
only those
sector-funded education.
Only those whose parents are able to pay for education are those who are getting educated. Majority whose parents are not able to pay are those we have abandoned to the public schools. Because they are poor, because they are largely uneducated, they lack voice. Because they lack voice, they cannot organize. Because they cannot organize, they cannot agitate. Because they cannot agitate, then poverty becomes transmitted from generation to generation.
So we're clearly creating two groups of citizens here.
Exactly.
What are the likely consequences, likely social consequences of this?
There's no society on earth that can survive the kind of exclusion that we are breeding with education in Nigeria. Nigerian children are attending schools more than at any other time in our history. Even though we say 10 million children are out of school, yes, but at no other time in our history do we have more children in school as we have today, right? But the question is, yes, we are counting the numbers, enrollment is increasing, but what is happening to education? Are they getting educated? The answer is no. In fact, I like to say that Nigeria is probably one of the few countries in the world where parents got better education than their children. Right. If you remember the public schools you attended, right, that I attended, those public schools are not able to deliver the kind of education that we got from those schools anymore. So I think the situation we have found ourselves today in Nigeria's education is very complex, it's very difficult, and there are no easy answers.
Please hold on to that thought. We have to take a break now. We ask that you please join us again after this break when we'll be discussing further the quality of education.